Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Jai Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. So, moving right along, Srila Prabhupada had to contend with a whole drug culture and youth that had been infected by a drug culture. Prabhupada had to teach that Krishna consciousness was beyond the revered LSD trip. Do you think taking LSD can produce ecstasy and higher consciousness? He once asked his storefront audience. Then just imagine a room full of LSD. Krishna consciousness is like that. He would say that for the alcoholic, the alcohol was Krishna. If we could be so addicted to Krishna as an alcoholic is to alcohol, we would be pure devotees. Krishna consciousness is like that. People would regularly come in and ask Swamiji's disciples, "Do you get high from this?" And the devotees would answer, "Oh yes, you can get high just by chanting. Why don't you try it?" Greg Scharf, Brahmananda's brother, hadn't tried LSD, but he wanted higher consciousness. So he decided to try the chanting. And you could see this was the, they had a mantra rock festival, and they made really cool posters. A friend of ours has this poster. Greg, I was 18. Everyone in the storefront had taken LSD, and I thought maybe I should too, because I wanted to feel like part of the crowd. So I asked Umapati, "Hey Umapati, do you think I should try LSD? Because I don't know what you guys are talking about." He said no, that Swami said you didn't need LSD. I never did take it, so I guess it was okay. Hari Griva, have you ever heard of LSD? It's a psychedelic drug that comes like a pill. If you take it, you get religious ecstasies. Do you think that this can help my spiritual life? Prabhupada, you don't need to take anything for your spiritual life. Your spiritual life is already here. But because Swamiji seemed so absolutely positive, therefore there was no question of not agreeing. Srila Prabhupada had a way about him. If you had a question, just by being in his presence, it was answered. Srila Prabhupada was just like living in Vrindavan. To be in his association, it was as if you were living in the Dham. Srila Prabhupada created Dhams all over the world, and wherever he was, it was a Dham. And so you felt that. You got the collect, whatever adhikar he shared with you. He took you with him. So you could understand just by his conviction, his commitment, his assuredness, his absoluteness, you knew it was true. Just like you all here are in Vrindavan, you feel, it's something you feel strongly. And the symptom of the soul is feeling and activity. So when you're feeling Krishna conscious and you're serving Krishna, this is exactly what Srila Prabhupada's saying. This is happy life. He was making the hippies into happies. Satsvarup. I knew Swamiji was in a state of exalted consciousness, and I was hoping that somehow he could teach the process to me. In the privacy of his room, I asked him, is there a spiritual advancement that you can make from which you won't fall back? By his answer, yes, I was convinced that my own attempts to be spiritual on LSD only to fall down later could be replaced by a totally spiritual life such as Swamiji had. I could see he was convinced, then I was convinced. He shared his being convinced with you, and it was just blessed to be in his presence. Greg, LSD was like the spiritual drug of the times, and Swamiji was the only one who dared to speak out against it, saying it was nonsense. I think that was the first battle he had to conquer in trying to promote this movement in the Lower East Side. Even those who came regularly to the storefront thought LSD was good. And when I was making this slideshow, Srila Prabhupada came. I started to understand more just by digging into Srila Prabhupada's life and mission. And he came to do battle with the rascal scientists that were making life, everything, in a materialistic experience. And the first order of business was doing battle with these over-intelligent, he called them over-intelligent academic scientists that were tinkering with the brains of the youth through drugs. They were destroying the generation. And Prabhupada came to save us from the tinkering of demons on the psyches of the youth, of the world. This hippie movement was worldwide. He had seen them even in the streets in Delhi. And he came to defeat these academic demons in the guise of scientific advancement by re-inculcating the spiritual truth. He explained to us, if you're not afraid of Maya, you should be. The demons are here to take God out of our lives, all of us. And Prabhupada came to reinstate our center to be Krishna consciousness. And probably the most famous experiments were with LSD in those days were by Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, Harvard psychology instructors who studied the effects of the drug, published their findings in professional journals, and advocated the use of LSD for self-realization and fulfillment. Well, I got to meet his grandson. He's a devotee. He was here in Vrindavan on pilgrimage. So even Timothy Leary's grandson was saved by Srila Prabhupada. I thought that was beautiful. Irony, poetic justice. So after being fired from Harvard, Timothy Leary went on to become a national priest of LSD, and for some time ran an LSD commune in Millbrook, New York. He became like a guru. I mean, it's like taking it to the most ludicrous extent, a guru by taking a drug. When the members of the Millbrook commune heard about the Swami on the Lower East Side who led his followers in the chant, "That got you high," they began visiting the storefront. One night, a group of about 10 hippies from Millbrook came to Swamiji's kirtan. They all chanted, not so much in worship of Krishna as to see what kind of high the chanting could produce. There was a group of devoted souls that were searching any way they could, and they happened upon this drug. And even I was one of those. But what would happen was, when you would come down, your teeth would hurt, your body would hurt, your whole body would hurt. You would just be in misery, absolute suffering. And finally I said, no more of this ridiculous. It was the same boring thing every time anyway. You know, when you do the same old, it's useless. So I just gave it up. Absolutely, it's not a place that you even want to stay that long. So fortunately, Srila Prabhupada, he saved us from all of these things. And then there were those who just were like recreationalists. They weren't real spiritual seekers. They were into recreational intoxication. And what can you do about them? Prabhupada said there's the innocent, there's those who are really seeking Krishna consciousness, there's those who are just demoniac. And we avoid them. So Prabhupada replied that drugs were not necessary for spiritual life, and that they could not produce spiritual consciousness, and that all drug-induced religious visions were simply hallucinations. To realize God was not so easy or cheap that one could do it just by taking a pill or smoking. Chanting Hare Krishna, he explained, was a purifying process to uncover one's pure consciousness. Taking drugs would increase the covering and bar one from self-realization. So it was the opposite of what the seekers were being diverted into. I mean, really, when you think about it, the demons get great pleasure to divert those who are truly seeking Krishna consciousness. When they divert a sincere soul, they're very happy, one for the team. They've defeated a little bit of Krishna's army. So this was a very valiant effort that Srila Prabhupada did to come and do battle with those who were diverting the innocent and those who were sincerely seeking Krishna consciousness and bringing them back to Krishna. But have you ever taken LSD? The question now became a challenge. No, Prabhupada replied, I have never taken any of these, not even cigarettes or tea. If you haven't taken it, then how can you say what it is? The Millbrookers looked around smiling like they had got some cool information. 2 or 3 even burst out with laughter, and they snapped their fingers thinking Swamiji had been checkmated. I have not taken, Prabhupada replied regally from his dais. But my disciples have taken all these things, marijuana, LSD, many times, and they have given them all up. You can hear from them. Harigriva, you can speak. And Harigriva sat up a little and spoke out in his centaurian best. He was very erudite. You can tell by it, like poetic, the way he spoke. Prabhupada, one whom many, many, many Prabhu's masters surrendered at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. He just had to activate one. Then all of a sudden, they could defeat easily. I remember once I was taking a class with Yashoda, and she brought in Mathura Bihari. He was young, very, very young. And they were, there was an organization having a contest, and they always said, that those Hare Krishnas, they don't know anything. So they were coming back, and they saw all this hubbub going on at Fogel Ashram. There was a big Bhagavad-Gita contest. And so the 2 Guru Coolies went in, and one of them knew Mathura Bihari is really great, and he paid the entrance fee, and he said, you have to compete. And he won, hands down. And he was And his friend yelled, "Our youngest babies can come in and defeat all you guys." And it's true. Prabhupada, like Jiva Goswami, Prabhupada wasn't into this stuff, but his babies could defeat them easily. Very easily, no problem, because they were empowered by Srila Prabhupada. Well, no matter how high you get on LSD, Srila Prabhupada said, you eventually reach a peak, and then you have to come back down, just like traveling in outer space in a rocket ship. He gave one of Swamiji's familiar examples. Your spacecraft can travel very far away from the Earth for thousands of miles, day after day, but it cannot simply go on traveling and traveling. Eventually, you must land. On LSD, we experience going up, and we always have to come down again. That's not spiritual consciousness. When you actually attain spiritual or Krishna consciousness, you stay high because you go to Krishna. You don't have to come down. You can stay high forever. That was the big mantra, stay high forever, no come downs. Srila Prabhupada was just saving us. No more coming down. No more. We don't have to. Prabhupada was sitting in his back room with Harekrishna and Umapati and other disciples. The evening meeting had just ended and the visitors from Millbrook had gone. Krishna consciousness is so nice, Swamiji. Umapati spoke up. You just get higher and higher. You don't come down. Prabhupada smiled. Yes, that's right. No more coming down. Umapati said, laughing, and the others also began to laugh. Some clapped their hands, repeating, no more coming down. The conversation inspired Hayagriva and Umapati to produce a new handbill. Stay high forever, no more coming down. It's like, as preachers, you have to find out what the pulse is on the youth, what's happening, what would make them excited. I've been studying a lot about Gen X, trying to see what would motivate them and how we could introduce Krishna consciousness to them, what is working for them. They've been through a lot of things. We look at it sociologically and figure out how to preach, what will make them interested in Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada was getting to us. And the other part of us, we were in rebellion. We were in so much rebellion. And Krishna consciousness is rebellion against the material nature. It's complete rebellion against the material nature, and it's complete supplication to the spiritual energy. So it's war on Maya. Practice Krishna consciousness. Expand your consciousness by practicing the transcendental sound vibration. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The leaflet went on to extol Krishna consciousness over any other high. It included phrases like end all bring downs and turn on, and it spoke against employing artificially induced methods of self-realization and expanded consciousness. Someone objected to the flyers playing too much off the hippie mentality, but Prabhupada said it was all right. We got the stamp of Srila Prabhupada's approval. Greg, when these drug people on the Lower East Side came and talked to Swamiji, he was so patient with them. He was speaking on a philosophy which they had never heard before. When someone takes LSD, they're really into themselves, and they don't hear properly when someone talks to them. So Swamiji would make particular points, and they wouldn't understand him. So he would have to make the same point again using the hammering technique. You just keep hammering over and over, hammer that point till they finally get it this way, that way, the other way, that same point over and over. Prabhupada used the hammering technique. So he would make that same point. He was very patient with these people, but he would not give in to their claim that LSD was a bona fide spiritual aid to self-realization. No way, no how. October 1966, Tompkins Square Park was a park on the Lower East Side. On the south, it was bordered by 7th Street and its 4- and 5-storied brownstone tenements. And on the north side was 10th with more brownstones, but in better condition, and the very old small buildings that housed Tompkins Square branch of the New York Public Library. On Avenue B, the park's east border, stood St. Bridget's Church, built in 1848 when the neighborhood had been entirely Irish. The church, school, and rectory still occupied much of the block and the west border of the park. Avenue A was lined with tiny old candy stores selling newspapers, cigarettes, magazines, cigarettes, and egg cream sodas at the counter. There were also a few bars, several grocery stores, and a couple of Slavic restaurants specializing in expensive vegetable broths, which brought Ukrainians and hippies side by side for bodily nourishment. Here you see the picture of Hari Griva speaking at Tompkins Square. The park's 10 acres held many tall trees, but at least half the park was paved. I wanted to point out this, see this bottle here? Prabhupada is filled with manjaris and water. So Prabhupada always had a big bottle on his desk, and it was filled with manjaris and water, and he would drink the water. And it was fully, there's a story, I'm sure you've all heard it, about the miracle at the mango grove, the halfway point to Mayapur, where all his disciples were so sick, and he pulled out his tulsi water and gave a little bit to each one of them, and they all recovered. Very magical. So this tulsi elixir here, not heated, just water in a glass with the manjaris, and it just gives it, she just gives her essence into the water. In Hawaii, we had tons of tulsi plants, so he always had a big bottle of water filled with tulsi. And the other thing, I'm seeing the gardenias there, he would put them on his forehead and on his eyes, and he said, this is very good for the health, very healing. Smell it and touch it like that. Simple ways in which to honor Krishna Prasadam. Healthful. So since the weather was, the park's 10 acres held many tall trees, and at least half the park was paved, still is. A network of 5-foot heavy wrought iron fences. They go to this park for Rath Yatra. Wrought iron fences weaved through the park, lining the walkways and protecting the grass. The fences and the many walkways and entrances to the park gave it the effect of a maze. Since the weather was still warm and it was Sunday, the park was crowded with people. Almost all the space on the benches that lined the sidewalks were occupied. There were old people, mostly Ukrainians, dressed in outdated suits and sweaters, even in the warm weather, sitting together in clans talking. There were many children in the park also, mostly Puerto Ricans and blacks, but also fair-haired, hard-faced slum kids racing around on bikes or playing with balls and frisbees. The basketball and handball courts were mostly taken by teenagers, and as always, there were plenty of loose running dogs. In those days, we didn't have the leash law. Now there's a leash law. But dogs just ran around, did whatever they wanted, and there's some real wonderful pastimes. There's one pastime in Hawaii in 1969 where Srila Prabhupada, he would walk. It's a beach park called Swansea Beach Park, but we call it Swami Beach Park. It's so close. We hope someday we can get the name changed, because Prabhupada lived up the hill and he'd come down and he'd walk in the park. And there was a young German shepherd named Baron that would run and frolic with Prabhupada. And you could imagine sometimes Prabhupada might show him the cane, but he never did. This dog had some infatuation with Srila Prabhupada, and he would play with him. And he would rub against Prabhupada. He literally was just frolicking with Prabhupada. And after the month was passed, when Srila Prabhupada left, the dog just disappeared into thin air. And the owners came looking, because they saw this rasa that the dog had with Srila Prabhupada. And they asked, did we know where the dog was? And we said, no, nobody knew where the dog was. But absolutely years later, the owner's son helped the temple doing accounting work for us. And he used to make a joke, I'm Prabhupada's only meat-eating atheist disciple, because he was an atheist and a meat-eater, but he was devoted to serving Prabhupada anyway. So don't underestimate Srila Prabhupada's divine mercy, because he can engage anybody and everybody, even a dog. Hare Krishna. From Guru Das's book, Love, Medicine, and Music. Someone in the crowd said, Swami can make peace. A small contingent of kids came to the Swami and asked him to come. Immediately, there was some discord developing between the Black Panthers and the Diggers. And Srila Prabhupada, so they were saying Srila Prabhupada can solve it. Immediately, Swami got up and prepared to go. I too got up wanting to protect my mentor, but also because I had experience with these types of situations even since the Newport riots or on the line in Selma. There was a tremendous amount of racial discord, a lot of and this was also going to be a racial discord situation. And Srila Prabhupada was a golden Vaikuntha man. He had the color of skin that everybody wanted. Beautiful, beautiful golden, molten golden skin. We white people were trying to get that golden skin by baking in the sun. The darker people were trying to get their color down less. Everybody wanted the exact color that Prabhupada was. He was just absolutely attractive. And even though he was older, everything about him, I remembered sketching the bow of his lips, sketching him while lecturing, the bow of his lips and the curve of his nose, everything, and the wave of the way that his long fingers would move when he lectured. He was very demonstrative with his hands. So we were all in love, what can I say? We were all madly in love with Srila Prabhupada. Everything about him was graceful. And you'll see this is the same situation with Guru Das. The word came with some other kids that peace prevailed due to the Maha Mantra. Allen Ginsberg was on the scene and chanted on his portable harmonium, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When Swamiji heard this, he smiled and sat down because behind his trunk desk, chanting quietly on his japa beads. We felt as if Krishna was protecting the Swami and of us too. He sat together in a comfortable silence. He did not talk to fill in social lapses or put on airs. He was very economical with his words, very economical. If he didn't have to speak, if he could just look up at the window, you might know, oh, it's time to close the shades. Or, he would look at the fan and it meant time to turn on the fan. And he had trained his servants so that nonverbal commands. And they would be, because they were so much loving Prabhupada, they were attentive to the cues. Whatever Prabhupada would say by his glance here or there, they would immediately take. And Prabhupada said there's 3 types of servants. One, you don't have to say, they just know. And Prabhupada, he liked those that he could just glance at something and they would just understand. And then he said the second class is you tell them what to do, and they do it. You would think that was first class. No, that's not. That's second class. And then third class, you tell them what to do, and they do something different, or it becomes problematic, or they just don't do it at all and have some excuse. So we sat together in a comfortable silence. He did not talk to fill up the social lapses or put on airs. He was cool, and his beaming smile did seem to increase as I spent more time with him. He encouraged me as I learned the basics. Sorry, I was typing from his book and I made quite a few mistakes, I can see. He encouraged me as I learned the basics of devotion. The growing pains and consultations of others also helped immensely. I found even more excuses to visit him. When I did visit him and other visitors came in, I would swing into action as Swami's assistant, seeing to the comforts of the guests and helping the Swami so he could concentrate on preaching to the guests. As we were sitting together, the Swami wrapped his chadar around himself. "Are you cold?" I inquired. "Yes, a little," he said. But the Swami never complained or belabored for his own comforts. I ran to get a blanket to wrap around his shoulders, thinking how he rarely asked for anything. Prabhupada was self-sufficient. Family. Swamiji seemed to dote on me especially, and I felt that I was his pet. And I have to say that everyone felt like that we're in his inner circle. He made everyone feel like they were special. A spiritual personality is like this. They just enliven you and encourage you in such a way. However, everyone felt that way with Swami, which is why so many young disciples joined him and gave their lives in devotion. We felt like the gopis felt with Lord Krishna. Each one of us felt special, and Krishna interacted specially with each one as he was attentive to the various personalities and whims of his devotees. Similarly, each of us felt a special relationship or rasa with Swami. I still felt that he treated me specially as he did. I reciprocated through the years. We felt happy and comfortable in each other's presence. The more I got to know him, the more I liked him. This is how it works. Very beautiful. The Swami and my new family became my reality. Although the life was pure, the food different, the somewhat regulated way of life replaced the spontaneous, variegated, pleasurable, day-to-day, hand-to-mouth existence that I had led before. The Swami was making my life better. I had a new meaning to life. I was now living a new reality. My time was spiritually engaged. The Swami, in fact, brought me the whole Vedic culture. Again, he said, I brought a tangible lifestyle to them. He did. It was down to the littlest thing. He taught us even hygiene, how to eat with the right hand, how to use the left hand for moochy things. We didn't even know that. We didn't have that common sense. I remembered a quote I heard from the blues singer, Mississippi John Hurt. "You've watched the traffic, not the signal. I was into my inner soul reality, the traffic, and not into the surface reality of the temporary pleasures, the signals." When you really think about the simplicity of that and the complexity of what the world's become like now, with us being so habituated to the notifications on our phone. I just heard that, tick, 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 tick. We're all so habituated to that notification. And what someone is sending me now. It's instant gratification and distraction from Krishna. And hopefully we're engaging all of these things. Prabhupada said for the devotees, we engage them in Krishna's service. These items are being engaged in Krishna's service. So they're becoming purified. It's not that they're bad, it's how we use them. Is it tempting us away from Krishna, or is it helping us to preach, to share Krishna? Is it increasing our pratista? That's dangerous. Or is it increasing the glories of Krishna? That's the happy place, eternal happy place. And the hippies were there, different from the others, the bearded bohemian men and their long-haired young girlfriends dressed in old blue jeans were still an unusual sight, even in the Lower East Side melting pot. Their presence created tension. They were from the middle-class families, and so they had not been driven to the slums by dire economic necessity. This created conflicts in their dealings with the underprivileged immigrants. And the hippies' well-known proclivity for psychedelic drugs, their revolt against their families and affluence, and their absorption in the avant-garde sometimes made them the jeered minority among the neighbors. But the hippies just wanted to do their own thing and create their own revolution for love and peace, so usually they were tolerated, although not appreciated. This was a sign of the times, this turn on, tune in, drop out, Dr. Timothy Leary. We needed to drop into Krishna consciousness, and drop out of Maya. There were various groups among the young and hip in Tompkins Square Park. There were friends who had gone to the same school together, who took the same drug together, who agreed on a particular philosophy of art, literature, politics, or metaphysics. There were lovers. There were groups hanging out together for reasons undecipherable, except for the common purpose of doing their own thing. And there were others who lived like hermits. A loner would sit on the park bench analyzing the effects of cocaine, looking up at the strangely rustling green leaves in the trees and the blue sky above the tenements, and then down to the garbage at his feet as he helplessly followed his mind from fear to illumination, to disgust, to hallucination, on and on, until after a few hours the drug began to wear off, and he was again a common stranger. Sometimes they would sit up all night, spaced out in the park, until at last, in the light of morning, they would stretch out on the benches to sleep. So this was on the cover of Life magazine. Actually, besides on the cover of Life, there was the Hare Krishna explosion. That was a wonderful thing. But this LSD had gotten out of control, and there were children thinking they could fly off of buildings, dying, not knowing they were committing suicide because of their hallucinations. They were out of touch with what was really going on with them. So children were dying, young people were dying also. But whatever the hippies' diverse interests and drives, the Lower East Side was an essential part of the mystique. It was not just a dirty slum, it was the best place in the world to conduct the experiment in consciousness. For all its filth and threat of violence and the confined life of its brownstone tenements, the Lower East Side was still the forefront of the revolution in mind expansion. Unless you were living there and taking psychedelics or marijuana, or at least intellectually pursuing the quest for free personal religion, you weren't enlightened and you weren't taking part in the most progressive evolution of human consciousness. And it was this searching, a quest beyond the humdrum existence of the ordinary materialistic, straight American that brought unity to the otherwise eclectic gathering of hippies on the Lower East Side. So there was one book that I really do like a lot, and it's a hagiography of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he is there describing the times that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself, he was living in a time of great change, because the Westerners, the British were there employing the Bhadralok, the elite Bengalis, the elite educated Bengalis, and they were teaching them their lifestyle. And what was happening at that time is so similar as to what was happening at the time that Srila Prabhupada came to save us. There was so much chaos and there was so much change in cultural revolution. The British were teaching the Bhadralok, the elite Bengalis, how to live. But they had special places they lived in, and they kept them in. They basically did everything. These educated Indians were doing everything, but they were being subjected by the British. So while they learned critical thinking and college, they were all college educated, they weren't Westerners. So they could only come up to a glass ceiling. They were kept to do everything. They were exploited. And those who were embracing Western thought and Western lifestyle, they were going through a very, very chaotic time. Their children were in difficulty. There was divorce was actually happening even in the time of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He was seeing what was happening, and he himself was questioning these things. But in the chaos, there's great opportunity for incredible creativity, and freedom can come from it. So this time that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur found himself in, we also, as Westerners, we were learning everything about Krishna consciousness, how to dress, how to walk, how to talk, how to speak, how to pronounce the words. But there's also, we're not Indian. So we hit the glass ceiling also. That we were in a culture, we are learning a culture, we're in a culture. And so there's an awkwardness and a chaos that comes through it. But in surrendering to Prabhupada's lotus feet, there was great creativity. It was a renaissance of art. Prabhupada created the art department that was illustrating all of his books. It was a renaissance. Show me that now. It was a renaissance. Just when Lord Chaitanya appeared, there was a renaissance in the world. Even in Europe, there was all this spiritual art that was coming out because of the wake of love of God. And because of the wake of love of God coming from Srila Prabhupada, there was a renaissance of art and creativity that swept up the hippies. They were rebellious, they were chaotic, they were creative. And they didn't think in the box. So Prabhupada could engage us nicely. So it was an opportunity. But there's a culture in a culture, and sociologically there's some interest here of how it is that he trained up Brahmins. He trained us in deity worship. He trained us in a lifestyle that is so different than a Western lifestyle. So incredibly different. It did affect our children too, because they didn't quite know how to fit in. There was some fallout there. I just had my son here, and he really, he spent a month here, and he went to Kumbh Mela with us and all. And he was with Prabhupada. He traveled with Prabhupada for 3 months, but he's had a hard time. And I want to say something, people don't understand the Guru Coolies have had a hard time, but they were, in a sense, almost sacrificed. But they are devotees. Like he said, temple and devotee life is his happy place. He wakes up hearing the tinkling of bells and thinking of a sweet, getting a maha sweet. That's his life. So Guru Coolies are different. Please forgive them for their uniqueness. They were born and raised in a very difficult time. Please forgive them and give them special mercy. I implore you, for the sake of the Prabhupada's next generation. Swamiji, accompanied by half a dozen disciples, was walking the 8 blocks to the park from the storefront. Brahmananda carried the harmonium and Swami's drum. Kirtananda, now shaven-headed at Swamiji's request and dressed in loose flowing canary yellow robes, created an extra sensation. Drivers pulled their cars over to have a look, their passengers leaning forward, gaping at the outrageous dress and shaved head. As the group passed a store, people inside would poke each other and indicate the spectacle. People came to the windows of their tenements, taking in the Swami and his group as if a parade were passing. We were so different. They used to call us the Bala heads. Bald head, Bala head. So they didn't know what, they had never experienced anything like this. The Puerto Rican tough guys especially couldn't restrain themselves from exaggerated reactions. Hey, Buddha, they taunted. Hey, you forgot to change your pajamas. They made shrill screams as if imitating Indian war whoops they had heard in Hollywood westerns. We didn't care. Here, this is the Hare Krishna explosion. And it was even, we had it in the Hawaii newspaper, because 1969, May 1st, that's when I met the devotees, and it was a Jimi Hendrix concert, and it was let go. He canceled the concert, so the devotees were the concert. And in the park, everybody was chanting and following the devotees as was a Congo line. And in the newspaper the next day, it said the Hare Krishna explosion. So we were on the scene, but we were getting negative and positive. But Prabhupada said the only bad advertising is no advertising. So any advertising was good. Prabhupada let us know, don't worry, it's good. Just get them to chant. Say Hare Krishna, because then their spiritual life has begun. Hey, Arabs, exclaimed one heckler who began imitating what he thought was an Eastern dance. No one on the street knew anything about Krishna consciousness, nor even of Hindu culture and customs. To them, the Swami's entourage was just a bunch of crazy hippies showing off, but they didn't quite know what to make of Swami. There was a court case legitimizing, saying that this is an ancient religion. We had to actually prove it in court. I remember one year the Bhagavad-Gita as it is was on trial in Russia. Remember that? We distributed more Bhagavad-Gitas ever that time. It's good. Even if it's a bad thing, it's a good thing. To encourage, to them, the Swami's entourage was just a bunch of crazy hippies showing off, but they didn't quite know what to make of the Swami. He was different. Nevertheless, they were suspicious. Some, however, like Irving Halpern, a veteran Lower East Side resident, felt sympathetic towards this stranger who was apparently a very dignified person on a peaceful mission. It was undeniable. Srila Prabhupada was a Vaikuntha man. And just to see him, you knew. One day I was doing community service, and this fellow walked in that had helped Prabhupada on the stage here in Vrindavan. He was wearing an aloha shirt. He met Prabhupada once, and he came to Vrindavan. He helped Prabhupada on the stage at the University of Hawaii at the Kennedy Center. Prabhupada gave a talk. And one time, that's all it took. He got to come to Vrindavan. That's magnificent. So from Mukunda Maharaj's book, Miracle on 2nd Avenue, on the way to India, October 1966, Janaki and I finally decided to make the break from New York and head to India. We felt that everything was pushing us in that direction. Our meeting, the Swami, our initiation, our marriage, my arrest, and my freedom from the threat of Vietnam. He was no longer going to be drafted. So one warm autumn afternoon, I went over to the Swami's apartment to tell him that we were going to leave. Janaki and I are going to go to India for a while, Swami. Oh, he opened his eyes wide. When will you leave? Not tomorrow, but the next day. So soon? Yes. Will you fly from here? No, we're going to head over to the West Coast to Oregon, which is where I'm from, and then we'll go to India from there. He nodded. We're ready for India, I said, trying to explain. We want to experience its atmosphere and spirituality. Do you know anyone in India we could see, like someone we could contact? There is a man named Chandrasekhar Sharma, Prabhupada said. Is there an address and phone number I can give you? He reached into his fake leather maroon bag at the end of the sitting mat and pulled out a small book. His address is 3/51 Horsey Road. You can note it down. I fumbled for a pen and wrote on the back of a small piece of paper that was in my wallet. 3/51. What is stroke? I asked. Like this. He pointed to the book. I scooted over to him. Oh, you mean slash, I said. Yes, slash. Okay, and a phone number? Here it is, 416971. What city? Delhi, New Delhi. There was a long pause. I wasn't sure how to say goodbye to Swamiji. California would be a good place for you to start a temple. I said, at last. There's lots of interest in India and spirituality in that part of the country. You can imagine, Prabhupada was kind of shocked. Mukunda Maharaj was an important part of their Sangha, and all of a sudden he's up and going to India. It was kind of a big thing. So Prabhupada was quiet. And so Mukunda felt awkward and had to fill it all in. So he started saying, California would be a good place for you to start a temple. I said, at last. There's lots of interest in India and spirituality in that part of the country, especially Los Angeles. There's lots of open-minded people there. Some even understand Sanskrit, like Ishwara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Nadir Adir Govindar Sarva Karna Karnam. The Swami's face lit up like a light bulb when I recited the one and only Sanskrit verse that I'd memorized. The verse he'd taught us on Saturday Sanskrit class. A huge grin appeared upon his face. Oh, very good, he exclaimed. Uh-oh, I messed up on the typing. And he said, Brahma Samhita verse. Yes, Swami, I thought I should type to memorize it. I should try to memorize it. He nodded, obviously very pleased. Somehow the Sanskrit words seemed to mean more to him than the entire conversation. Prabhupada, he could communicate everything. Well, I guess I'll go then, I said. Hare Krishna, I bowed down on the floor before him, as I'd seen others do. I heard the Swami's voice behind me as I reached the door. Mukunda? I turned around. Just see if you can start one center on the West Coast. It would be a great service. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada got him. I smiled and gave a half nod. Okay, I mumbled as I walked down the stairs to the Swamiji's courtyard. I could smell the garbage from the street and made my way back to our loft, wondering why the Swami had mentioned opening a center after all the goodbyes. When I mentioned opening a temple in California to the Swami, I only meant that I could really imagine a temple taking off there in the future. The next day, I hired a new drive-away Volkswagen station wagon, and Janaki and I packed up our belongings. It didn't take us long to clean out the loft, and by the following morning, we were ready to drive to Oregon. That's it, Hare Krishna. But just see, Prabhupada could take something, an idea, and give it back to you. I love that. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very, very much. Hare Hare Bo. Hare Krishna.